All right, AutoRecon version 2, people. Let's run. Let's run the help menu first. Okay. So this is pretty much the same thing. It takes, targets. It takes a target file if you want. It has. We've replaced. If anyone remember, there was concurrent targets and concurrent scans. That's gone now. There's just max scans now, and also max port scans. So max scans is like the maximum number of scans running at any one time, which defaults to 50. Max port scans. So this is tricky to explain, but effectively you have to have a separation between port scans and service scans, just so that you don't have the service scans taking up all the... Sorry, you don't have the port scans taking up all of the max scans. Because if you think about it, if you have 3 port scans per target and you give this thing 100 targets, then it's going to take up those 50 max scans with all of the port scans first. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do all the port scanning first. You want to do some port scanning and then do service scanning while the rest of the port scans run. So max port scans controls the maximum number of concurrent port scans, which obviously run first. It defaults to 10, which is not a static value. By default, it basically does a calculation, which is 20% of whatever your max scans is. So 20% of 50 is 10. You can obviously set this as a static value. You can't set it as more than max scans for obvious reasons. You can set it equal to max scans, at which point, it'll do all the port scans effectively, and then do service scans, then do port scans, service scans, etc. You can put config file. So it does have a config file. You can change the config file. We'll do global files a bit later. It has a tagging system. It has an exclude tagging system. Obviously, plugin directories, and then pretty much a lot of the default stuff. So this stuff is from version 1, pretty much similar code. One thing people asked for was having a timeout. So there's 2 timeouts. So you can define like a whole program timeout, which basically means, the maximum amount of time that AutoRecon should run total. All right. So if you scan 1,000 targets, but you want everything to end after 60 minutes, you can put that in there. I don't know how many targets you'll get through in 60 minutes, but if you want an absolute timeout, you can set that. You can also set a target timeout, so effectively how long AutoRecon should spend scanning every single target, the maximum amount. How are you getting the bottom bar in terminal? This is tmux, by the way. Yeah, so this is all tmux stuff, which is great if you don't use tmux. IPsec uses tmux. I just have a different style, I think. Okay, I think. Oh, I also have an accessible option, which basically turns off all of the colors and most, I think, of the little ASCII art things at the start of every line, just to make it easier for blind people, which was also a requested feature. I think, yeah. That's all we'll see. Let's see it in action. So I'll just do a regular scan with V against my local host. So this is pretty much the same. So as you can see, it's running. It does the top TCP port scan, does an all TCP port scan, it does a UDP, which I forgot to run with root, so it gives me a little error there. It's found. This is my local Kali, so it's found SSH and HTTP, which is fine, whatever. So it's running some SSH scans. It's running the dirbuster using Ferox Buster. Yeah, all finished scanning in 25 seconds. Lovely. This was the pattern matching stuff. A lot of this should be pretty similar to stuff you've seen before. But yeah, so what I figured we would do is create AutoRecon from scratch, kind of. So if you see here, these are all the files. Let me do a -1. So you got the main file, you got the config global, the plugins directory is obviously where the plugins are. The results is the one that's created. We'll remove that. And right now, if I go into the plugins directory, I apologize if you can't see the left bit. I don't know how to increase the size of this. These are all the plugins. So you have like your port scans. You have a lot of your HTTP stuff. I sorted these into categories basically. The name of the actual file doesn't matter. The name of the class does. But let's create a completely new directory. Plugins 2. There we go. Okay. So in plugins 2, I'm going to create a new file. And again, the file name doesn't matter as long as it doesn't start with an underscore. So effectively, if you start a file with an underscore, you can it won't load it. There was a reason for that. I think it's so you can technically write your own libraries and include them. But either way, we're gonna just create a file called port.py. Can everyone see the? I don't know if everyone can see the name of the file there, but you should be able to see the text at least. And so what we're going to do is we are going to do from AutoRecon import PortScan. So the PortScan is the PortScan object. AutoRecon, thank you. There we go. So this is the first line you'll need for any PortScan that you want to make, PortScan plugin. And then we create a class. And if you've done object-oriented programming before in Python, you'll understand this. If not, it's very easy. There's not many tricks. Again, I tried to make this as simple as possible. A lot of the time, you'll just be able to look at the plugin code that comes with it and just copy a lot. We're going to have a class. The name of the class really doesn't matter. We can just call it quick TCP. And then you want to specify that it is a PortScan class. So all your new classes that you make, or your plugins, need this function, which is basically underscore underscore init underscore underscore. It's the initialization function. And for reasons I won't go into, you also need to run this as the first line. This effectively pulls in... I said I wasn't going to explain it, but I will a little bit. It pulls in all the plugin stuff, all the PortScan stuff that you need, if that makes sense. So it kind of does its own little initialization. If there was another way around this, I would do it, but unfortunately there's not that I am aware of, so you just have to do that. Subclassing, right? So the thing you definitely need to do is give it a name, and that's easy. Just do self.name equals, and let's call it quick TCP. We'll do scan, there we go. Quick TCP scan. Okay? The self just refers to itself, really, that's all. There's this self thing up here, you can use it there. So that's the init function done. Okay, we're all done. Every plugin, every PortScan plugin, I should say, needs a run function, and that's where all the magic kind of happens. A bit later, we'll go into the other kinds of functions you can put. So what we'll do is we'll do async, because this run function is asynchronous. Okay, it's going to run in a separate thread. So you need to basically define it as asynchronous with async. What is that? Did my phone just... Oh, yep, apparently Siri thought I was asking for something. Okay, that's funny. I'm gonna turn on Do Not Disturb mode. Okay. That's gonna be a good clip. Alright, so we're gonna define this run function. And the run function of a PortScan, as you'll learn with object orientation, is all functions have to have a self reference basically if they're special functions. Then and run is a special function here, so we need to put the self, but it also gets a target which gets passed to it, and the target is literally this target object which you'll use to effectively do your scans. So the next thing we want to do, I want to copy. I got some code up here. I'm just going to copy down. The command that we're going to run is this one here. This is pretty much just copied straight out of AutoRecon version 1. It's a pretty simple command. There are, as you see, some kind of... they're technically formatting variables, but I'm treating them as regular variables. So you have access to a bunch of these, and they will change on the fly. So mmap extra, I think by default does -vv and --reason and -pn, so disabling ping. And obviously there's scandir, which defines the directory, the scans directory of whatever target you're scanning. Okay, so there's a few special ones, and obviously address there is the address of the target. Pretty self-explanatory. When I do the documentation, this will all be explained about what you can use. So we're gonna have to run this, and so we're gonna do target dot execute. I'll surround it like that. So the target basically is this target here. It has an execute function, which takes this argument and it will execute it in a bash shell. This is technically also an asynchronous function, and because we're calling it, we need to use the await keyword. Effectively means we're kind of awaiting the call. We're letting it run and return, and then we're doing something with it. So that's the only thing you need to do, really. But obviously, we actually want to grab the output of this function. So this function execute returns three things. It returns a process, it returns standard output, and it returns standard error. Okay. So when we've done this, we should have, so when this executes and returns, we should have a process, we should have some output, and we should have error. Don't forget the formatting. No, we don't need formatting. This is all handled. Don't worry about this. If you actually put the F there, it won't work, because this is actually passed to another function. So all that is happening behind the scenes. Like I said, tried to make this as simple as possible. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 different ways of extracting services from a PortScan, starting with the complicated stuff and ending with the most simple. Okay, and I'm just doing that to show you how varied you can be with this. So if the stuff looks really confusing at first, that's okay. It's supposed to be. It's going to get easier. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define a list called services. It's going to be empty, and then I'm going to do a while true loop, and then what we're going to do is we are going to read from this std out, which is this custom. It's actually a custom class I created to make things way easier, but we're going to set this to a line, and this std out object is technically asynchronous as well, so we need to await it. std out.readline. Okay, So that's how you read a line from standard output. If line is not none. How do you mean error handling, Angel? Let me sort this out. So we're gonna basically if line is not none. If the command error is out, yeah, it does spit out. It'll spit out STT error, but it also you'll see actually. Maybe we'll do that. Well, it does catch errors and report them to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the regex. So I have to import regex re. So this long string that looks confusing is a regular expression that matches mmap's output, and it effectively captures the port number, the protocol, and the service as long as it's open. Okay, the service being the service name, like HTTP, right? Okay, so we're going to do a match on that line, and then we're going to say if match. We are going to. So firstly, I'm going to copy and paste these. I think that should be fine. So we're going to set a protocol equal to the match group protocol, which is just this thing here. We're going to convert it to lowercase because obviously, you know, just TCP doesn't need to be uppercase or lowercase. It's easier this way. We're going to extract the PortScan, sorry, the port using the match group, and we're going to convert it to an integer, and we're going to extract the service name. Okay. We're also going to determine whether the service is running over SSL or TLS, and we do that with this lovely line where we set secure equal to true if either SSL or TLS is found in the service name, otherwise we set it to false. Okay, and then we do if this is just to really kind of help AutoRecon. Effectively, if the service starts with SSL / or TLS /, we're just going to remove those characters. That's all we're doing here. We don't care after this bit. After we set secure, we don't care about whether SSL is in the service, and it just makes the matching bit a bit harder. So we're going to remove that from the service, and then finally we're going to do services.append. So this is the list thing that we defined. We're going to append to this list a new service with the protocol, the port, the service, and the secure variable. And I need to import service from up here from AutoRecon, import the service object, which is used here. Okay. And then, so if the line is none, we're going to just break. Okay. And then we should be able to return services. We'll save that. I just want to make sure I haven't got... Yeah, okay. I'm going to replace spaces with tabs. Not like that, I'm not. Alright. There we go. Just to make sure that runs. Okay, let's try it. So we made this in the plugins 2 directory, so what we need to do is set plugins directory equal to plugins 2. Let me set it without a... Okay, yep, cannot import, invalid syntax, line 16. Why is that invalid? Oh, is not. So it does error reporting, right? Yeah, if line is not none. Okay, so this should, yeah, there you go. Okay, that works. And so now we will run, I'm going to cancel it and run it with -v. And see, it's replaced all these lovely variables. So that was the mmap extra. It's figured out where the scans directory is. You know, it's figured out the address. And it did the port scan, and then it finished because there's no service scans yet. Okay, but it did it. So let's go back because this is confusing. This is silly. So let's make it slightly easier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this line. Actually, I'm going to replace all of these lines. Yeah. So there is a function you can use in the target called extract service. And all you do is you say service equals target.extract service, and you pass it the line. And then if that, basically all that code that we just wrote is in this function, and it will try and match and extract and return a service object, or it will return none. So you need to do effectively an if service to determine whether a service was actually extracted. And then the same thing applies. You just append the service object that you got back to services. We'll save that. Let's rerun it. Yeah, hang on, replace all the tabs. There we go. So it should do the same thing. It should extract those two services, which it does. Lovely. But that's not good enough. This is still too complicated. So I'm going to delete all of this and do services equals target, await target.extract services. So this is extract services instead of extract service. And instead of passing it a line, because you don't have a line at this point, you just pass it standard output. And because it's technically another asynchronous function, you have to await it. And so effectively what this does is it'll read lines from std out and return a list of services, which you then return to the main function. So if we save that and rerun it, let's remove results again. You'll see it does exactly the same thing. Yeah, there we go. And if you check out the actual plugins, they all work like this. Okay, so this is the actual plugin, the default set of plugins for mmap scans, for port scans. They all effectively work this way. Cool. So we've got a port scan. We could, because you can define multiple plugins within a single file, so we could create a full TCP, right? But we don't need to. But you do exactly the same thing here. You just have to make sure they have different names. What we'll do now, though, is because we've got our port scan that's finding our two ports anyway, we'll code a service scan for one of those ports. And we'll do the HTTP port. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another file in this plugins2 directory. I'm just going to call it http.py. And now what we'll do is we will do from AutoRecon import ServiceScan, because this is a service scan now. Okay. The same thing before. You have a class. We're going to call ours dirbuster, and it's a service scan now instead of a port scan. It still has that weird init method. You just have to have that, unfortunately, and it still does the weird little super init call. Hang on, there we go. And then obviously you give it a name. So we're just going to call it dirbuster. Dirbuster, not actually referring to that ancient program, by the way. It's just a name. This time for a service scan, we need to do things slightly differently. We need to set a configure function. And that's simply to do a few things. For the most part, we're going to set patterns, like service patterns, to match. So obviously, you don't want this to run against everything. You only want it to run against services that match specific patterns, i.e. HTTP, right? So this is what this configure does. There's a few other things it does. You can set you can set patterns to match in the output. So that's something you can do as well. But for now, what we're just going to do is keep things simple and do a self.add service match. And we're going to give it, I think, anything that begins with HTTP will match. There's also another line I can add, and I will just because it should be there, but you can do negative matches. Effectively, don't run the plugin if it matches this. Right? This is a special service I found while writing version 1 of AutoRecon that I don't think is actually HTTP, so that's why it's in there. Okay, so that's that done. Now we need to define our asynchronous run, which this time doesn't get a target, it gets a service. Okay. So the service is one of those service objects effectively that we returned here. But it has a few other things, so it'll have information about the target as well, but if you need to get it, you can. But let's I'm just going to copy this command. So this is a command to use Ferox Buster. So again, it uses some of these variables, and you don't really have to know what these do, only that you can use them. But effectively, HTTP scheme is a special variable that will be HTTP or HTTPS, depending on whether the service is secure or not. You can give it the address, the port, everything else, pretty much. Everything else is pretty similar, so the scan directory and the naming scheme is this stuff. So again, we're going to run it, and this time you use service.execute to run this. And so you just do that. And that should just run. There's nothing... Coding like service scans, plugins can actually be quite easy if you just want to run a single command. So let's clear it out, remove the results directory, and rerun it. Okay, line 13 again. What did I do? Oh, I didn't define the function. That would be helpful. There we go. Alright, so it's running the quick TCP scan again, and now you see, okay, so it found HTTP, and then it immediately starts running our Dirbuster service scan. And you'll see it took slightly longer this time because it found some directories. Yeah. So I found some files, found a test.php. You know, this is basically just a really basic setup of Apache, I think. So that's all good. You can also, in this file, define a manual function, which is going to be all the manual commands from the first version that you. So say that you didn't want to run a long directory busting scan, but you still want to maybe run it afterwards, and you want it to print out the command. You can do that here, and you can do that using self.add manual command. You give it a description, so here's a longer busting command, and then you can either define a single command, like using this, using a string, or you can do an array, like a list. So we'll just do a list. We'll do a list of one. But let's copy this thing here that I have. So this just runs Ferox Buster. It doesn't run it. It's like it generates the command to run it with the big.txt list instead of common. Okay. And so if I save that, and let's remove the results again and then rerun it. What should happen is when it generates the results, there should be a manual commands file. Yep. In the results directory, in the scans, manual commands. There we go. So HTTP on TCP/80. Here's a longer busting command, and there it is. And so you can select that and copy it and run it manually. So that's that. Okay, let's make this slightly more complicated now, slightly more powerful. Because right now, all we're doing is we're just running this command pretty blindly. Before I do that, actually, let me tell you some more things that you can put in this initialization method. So you can set a priority. So by default, all plugins have a priority of 1. If you set a priority to less than 1, and it can be like literally 0.9 if you want, as long as it's less than 1, you can even go, I think you can pretty much even go negative if you wanted to. If you set less than 1, then that plugin is going to run before the others. All right, if it makes sense. Obviously, you know, this has 0 and this PortScan has 1, but it's, you know, the ServiceScan is not going to run before the PortScan. But this will run before any other ServiceScan, you know. Or it'll run at least before, you know, all the ones that have values bigger than this. Otherwise, I think it runs alphabetically. Okay. So, and conversely, if you set this to 2 or a number greater than 1, it's going to run after all the others. Okay. So let's just leave it at priority 0. We can also set custom tags. By default, all plugins have 1 tag, and that's default. You can define other tags effectively. The key thing to know about this is this overrides the tags. So if you want the plugin to still have default, you need to actually put it in there. But you know, we could tag this HTTP. We could tag this as long. It's not particularly long, but let's decide that it is. And then to show you the tagging thing, if we do instead exclude tags long, what should happen, hopefully, is it should just run the TCP scan now. Yeah, there you go. So it didn't run our service scan, even though it found HTTP, specifically because we defined it as long. Okay. So let's make this slightly more complicated. What we're going to do is everyone following along, by the way? I hope so. Any questions so far? Cool. Because what I'm about to do is, I think, probably the differentiator between AutoRecon version 2 and anything else. So we have threads set to 10. Okay. But what it's sorry, maybe include an option in the plugins to run a script on the output file. That's actually a feature I might include later. I might write a report plugin type, which then does something. But you could. There's nothing really stopping you from putting it here, right? You know, if you wanted to do something with the output, I mean, you could literally just do await service.execute rm and then put this if you wanted to. You know, just to give you an example of a completely useless thing to do, but you know that this will run Ferox Buster, and then once it's run, it will remove the results. But you can do whatever you want here, you know. So that's something you can do. You know, you don't have to run just one thing in this run. You can do anything. You can write Python code here. You can literally, you know, do as many things as you want, really. But yeah, having like a report plugin is something I've thought about. Okay, so we have a static value of 10 for the number of threads that Ferox Buster uses. And that's just because, you know, 10 is a nice number. It's not going to overload anything. At least it shouldn't. But let's say that you want to, you know, change this, but you don't want to change it in the plugin file. You want to make it configurable to users. So what we'll do is we'll go back to this configure option, and we'll do self dot add option. We'll call our option threads. We'll give it a default of 10. And then I'm going to copy the help text because otherwise we'll be here all day. And you set the help text. This is the number of threads to use when directory busting, defaults to, and then this is a special like tag, I guess. If you've ever used argparse in Python, this is pretty much just wrapper functions for that. So you can set that, or you can just set it to 10 if you really wanted to. It doesn't matter. But you do that easy. And then, if I clear this, and let's do -h, now you have this plugin argument section, okay? Where if you specify dirbuster.threads with a value, it will set the value. Right now, the plugin's not doing anything with it, okay? And to show you that that wasn't there before, if I comment it out, there you go, it disappears. All right, so I'm going to uncomment it. And so what we can do now is in our run function, what we can do is replace this 10 with, we're basically going to break up the string and put in a variable. We're going to do self.get option threads, but obviously this is going to fail miserably because threads is technically an integer. So what you need to do is you need just to make sure it's converted to a string. Okay, and so now if we rerun and we do --dirbuster.threads, let's say, let's go crazy, let's just do 50. What you'll see when this actually executes on the command line is, there you go, there's the T50, right? So we defined a command line variable on the fly and used it and created this. But you don't have to use the command line variable. Let's go to the config file. And this is where we can go in the config file. So the config file has a few things already. It has some global patterns, effectively. So it's going to match a lot of stuff. You can define global options as well, if you want to. We'll go into that shortly. But let's create a new section called dirbuster. And in this section, define threads as 20. And save this. And now, if we do a -h, you'll see, and believe me, this took way too much time to write, but it updated the default to 20. You can now effectively, the way it works is if it finds an option on the command line, it'll use that. If it doesn't find an option on the command line, it'll check the config file. If it doesn't find an option there, it'll go to whatever you define as the default here. So there's 3 locations you can define an option. All right. But if we run it again, and now we find it in the config file, what's going to happen is when it gets to the ServiceScan for HTTP, it should, I didn't do -v, which would actually print out the command. There we go. Threads is 20. Okay. So that's good. Let's make it better. Currently, it runs FerrixBuster. There are some people who do not like FerrixBuster. There are some people who like GoBuster. So, let's add a choice option called tool. And we're going to default to Ferox Buster. And we're going to give a list of choices. Ferox Buster is one of them. Go Buster is another. And what do we want to do? I'll just do help text. The tool you want to use. Default is whatever the default is. Yep. Save that. So now again, if we run it with the -h, now we have debuster.tool, and we can set it to either Ferox Buster or Go Buster. The default is Ferox Buster. So how do we do this down here? Well, we can do a simple if statement, if self.getOption tool. And one thing you should notice, by the way, we're defining the option as tool and threads here. It AutoRecon automatically prepends the name of the plugin, and that's to make sure that, you know, two tools can't create threads. Well, they can, but they won't get mixed up. Okay, so we'll say if self.getOption tool is equal to Ferox Buster, we're gonna run the Ferox Buster code. Elif self.getOption tool, and I mean you can set this to a variable if you wanted, I guess, but I'm just not going to. It's Go Buster. I already have the code for this here, I think. Yeah. So now instead we execute Go Buster. It does exactly the same thing. It has the threads option, right? So let's run it again. But this time we will do gobuster.tool equals gobust, not equals. What am I doing? You can, I guess you can do equals. So now you see it's running GoBuster instead. Okay, that's cool. Again, if you really want to, you can set it here. Tool equals GoBuster. And then you don't even need to set this. Yep, so it ran GoBuster. Okay. So that's the option. Angel D, I did think about that. I think it's probably possible. It's certainly something I consider. The issue with it is because AutoRecon is so concurrent and threaded and asynchronous, and you have this, you have output coming in all different directions, because you could have technically 3 or 4 or even technically 50 tools, I guess, outputting to the command line at the same time. So you'd have to get a way around. You'd have to almost pause that, which could be possible. Yeah, I mean, I do use effectively locks a lot in this. So it's something worth considering. I don't think it's a massive problem right now, because I think a lot of the time you can do everything with config files. But yeah, if it becomes an issue, we can always add that. Okay, let's make this more complicated. Where are we? Right now, we run one word list. Okay, we run common.txt. What if we want to run multiple word lists? Okay, let's do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a list option called word list. And the default is just going to be, it has to be, I think, it doesn't have to be an array or a list, but we can, we'll test it without. So the default is going to be common.txt. And then let me copy the help text again. This is a special option. Because if you read the help text, the word list to use when directory busting, specify the option multiple times to use multiple word lists. Okay. So the idea being, if I do -h again, so I can set dirbuster dot word list to, I don't know, word list.txt. I can also set it again. wordlist2.txt. And contrary to what you might think, this option doesn't overwrite this one. It just combines them into a list. So you'll have a list containing wordlist.txt and wordlist2.txt. And so if we go back to the tool, so the plugin, what we can do is we can do for word list in self.get option, can't type today, word list, we'll tab indent those. Now what I'm about to do might look a bit weird, but I'll explain it later. I'm just going to create a name variable based on the word list. And then what we're going to do is replace this word list here with the word list variable, which was created up here in the for loop. And we'll copy this and put it down here again for GoBuster. Okay. Save that. This name variable, really all this does is it takes the path of the word list, it extracts the actual file name, and then it takes off the extension. So for instance, in this word list here, the name variable would be just set to common. And that's so we can set the output file as something different each time. And again, if this is confusing, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be for anyone who's who's used to coding like this, right? But you know, this is making it really complicated. Nobody really needs to do this unless they have a massive need for. Yeah, if it doesn't have an extension, I believe it will just return the name. So we're going to put this in here. Right there. Okay. So let's use our config file for this. So you can set lists in the config file. And so what we'll do, if I actually go back to the original HTTP plugin, because I think, yes, this is the original one. So if I scroll down, right. Okay, so we're going to take this default list. We're going to put that as a variable, so that is a thing in the list. We're also going to take this big.txt, put it in there. We're also going to take everyone's favorite directory list 2.3, and we'll also stick it in there. These variables, no, these are they're specific variables. You cannot alter them. They basically are placeholders that when you send this command to execute, the execute function. The execute function will basically replace all these with what they should probably be. So it's contextual. So like it's just easier this way. You can technically have access to a lot of these via the service object. Like service has a port number, and it also has a protocol. Technically, service also will have a link back to a target, so it'll have an address there as well. So you could technically do this without most of these, I think. But these are just to make it super easy, you know. Because otherwise, you'd have to do something like this. Let me show you. You'd have to do service, maybe not with caps locks, but service.target.address, right? Which is just confusing. And so it's just much easier just to have that stored as an address variable, which is effectively handled automatically by the execute function. So I think that should do it. Let's again run with -h, and yeah, as you see, by default, it's going to run these 3 word lists because we configured that in the config file. So let's do that again. We'll remove the results directory just so we can show off. So we're going to scan localhost. Very new. What's AutoRecon supposed to do? It's a tool used for. Oh, hang on. Here you go, Angel. You were talking about exception handling. There you go. If you have an exception in your code, it'll do this. So I forgot that this code technically uses the OS library, so I just need to import it at the top here. I'm actually kind of glad that happened because it shows how beautifully you get exceptions. So that should work now. Yeah, so AutoRecon, what it does is it does port scanning, and it extracts the services from those port scans, and then it has a bunch of predefined plugins that match certain services, which will execute other commands on those services. So it's generally used for enumeration. So, for instance, in this instance, we found HTTP, and we coded an HTTP plugin that runs various directory busting tools. So in this case, it's running GoBuster against 3 different word lists. Now you see, obviously, this one is taking the longest amount of time. If we go to the results, though, we should have some results already. Yeah, so we have common, we have big. This one's still running, obviously. Okay, so we'll let that run, or maybe not. Okay, it's actually a good point to show you that this is the heartbeat feature, which every minute by default will tell you how many scans are still running. And so we have 1 scan running. It's this. The issue with FFUF is it didn't like it when I redirected output into a file, and its output options were awful. There was no plain text output. There was like a CSV and a JSON, which made no sense. So it's still technically in here, I believe. I think so. If I go back to the actual HTTP plugin, hang on a minute. Yeah, here we go. FFVF is still here. Yeah, you could totally pass the JSON object using that. And you could do that directly after you've executed if you wanted. Like, this is the beauty of this new system, is you can execute multiple things in a single plugin, one after the other. So that's something you can definitely do. Let's see if this is finished. It hasn't, because it's this stupid long directory. Okay, we're going to cancel that. And I'll probably try and clear up this, but... okay. Let's show how globals work. Hey, Faraday. So far we have defined options within a plugin, but say there's an option that you think should be shared between plugins. All right, this won't have as many uses, but it's still good to know. So we have this global .toml file where we defined two global options: username dash word list and password dash word list. And so that's basically used for brute forcing. One thing I should probably mention: so these options can't just be used by the run function. They can also be used by the manual. So, for instance, where we put this threads option here, we could replace it down here as well. Obviously, for some stuff like the word list, that won't work. Because the word list you have to iterate over. You could actually no, you could I believe do a while loop in here. I'll have to double check that. I'm pretty sure you can. Yeah, why don't we do it now? If not, I'll make sure that works. But let's double check. This is literally, I don't know how this is going to work or not. So this is fun. So we need to replace the word list with this. And that with this. Let me take out this big one, just so we get something that runs. This will be interesting. It might not do it the best way. Let's see, results, scans, manual commands. Doesn't look like it did it. So that might be something I have to fix. Oh, maybe, unless it doesn't do it until there. Hang on. Yeah, okay. It doesn't do that. It overrides it, right? That's something to fix. Okay, so back to globals. So let's say, for instance, let's try and make threads. Like, say you just want to use 20 threads for absolutely everything, or anything that wants to use a global thread. So we'll take that out of there, and we will go into globals. We'll define a new global.threads. We'll put a default equal to 20. And by the way, you can do everything you can with options in here. So you just have to set a type. So I think if you want a choice, you set type equals type equals choice. Stuff like that. But yeah, and then obviously, so I guess let's do it actually. Choices equals, you can either have one thread, 10 threads, or 20 threads. And the default is 20. Help equals threads, whatever. That should, I think, work. Let me just try it. Yeah, okay. So now we have a choice of threads 1, 10, or 20. If we want to use this in our HTTP plugin function, we just need to do get global option instead of get option. So if I save that there, and then we rerun it with global dot threads as, let's just do 1, and obviously -v so we can see the output. Invalid choice. Okay. That's gonna be funny. I think it's because it's strings. Yeah, hang on. I think this. Yeah, so that's probably something to fix as well. That's a nice bug. This is. I'm not promising bugless code here, by the way. Yeah, there you go. So now we got threads are set to 1. So is that everything? That's most things, I think. So could you have a template that defines your commands to run in conjunction to tags and pass that to AutoRecon? I mean, I want to say you could probably write a plugin to do it. I mean, that's the idea of the plugin system. Is, you know, you can define plugins that way, and you can write your own plugin directory, you know, and switch between them. So it'd be interesting to see that, I guess. But yeah, there's nothing like that really, and it would kind of goes against the way AutoRecon's supposed to work. But maybe you can give examples. Okay, what else is there I can talk about? There we go. So that finished because obviously it's running 1 thread at a time. Let me run the default. So, right, yeah. Okay, so the default. So obviously the globals stayed around because I defined them globally. So like by default, you have a few plugins using options already. So the curl path, for instance. So we have a curl plugin defaults to grabbing the root directory, but obviously the tools it has currently all these. I'll probably put some more in. The wordless stuff again, threads. The 161 community strings file, you can now change that on the fly. What else is there? Oh, obviously in the config file as well, I forgot to mention. So you can set a number of options for AutoRecon at the top. So for instance, if you wanted to set max scans, you could do max. I think underscore max scans is 10, for instance. Actually, let's set it to 1 to show you that it actually works. So we're using the old set now. So basically, it should run 3 port scans for localhost, but because we've set the max scans as 1, it will run them 1 at a time. So we can see that now. So it's running the top TCP port scan, which will finish. Then it will run all TCP ports. Then it will run UDP. Then it will start going through services 1 at a time. Very boring. But if you want to make AutoRecon single-threaded, this is how you do it. If you ever want to do that. But yeah, a lot of these you can set in a config file. So I think you can, obviously you can't set config file in a config file. I mean, but I think most of these you can set. I think you can set tags and exclude tags for sure. You can set global, I believe, max port scans. You can set all these. Obviously, if you're setting something that doesn't have an option, so single target will only scan one thing. So it won't create a directory named after the target. So, for instance, and because that doesn't take a value, you just set it to true. So, if I remove results and now try and run against localhost and Kali, it'll say you cannot provide more than one target when scanning in single target mode, right? Which makes sense. Now, if you scan localhost, I'll just cancel that. Now in the results file, you don't have a localhost directory, which otherwise you would have. How do you configure the scan so it bypasses a well-configured firewall? You won't find that in OSCP. Obviously, this is an OSCP tool. If you want to recode the port scans to be quieter, you can do that now. There's a lot more options, so you can code your own stuff. Yeah. And one thing that does remain, I should say, is if you scroll up these options, you have the nmap option, which overrides that special variable, the nmap extra variable in that's used by mostly, well, all the nmap scans generally. Okay, cat. Yeah, I changed to FFUF, and then I changed to Ferox Buster, and now all of them are back. If we go to the HTTP, the actual HTTP directory busting plugin, which is down here, you can see we got Ferox Buster, Go Buster, dirsearch, FFUF, and Derby. They're all functional. You can use whichever one you want. They will all work. And it's as easy as configuring it in a config file. I think that might be everything. Let me show you. I assume you just joined. Okay, cat. Let's show you how to do it. So if we run the help option, you can see there's this option dirbuster.tool. Okay, and say that you want to. So automatically it will run. Let me take that out. So by default, it runs Ferox Buster. Okay, but if you specify this. Let's do -v, GoBuster. So we're setting dirbuster tool to GoBuster, and we're running it against localhost. What will happen? Did I actually? Okay, good. So you'll see when we get down to it. Here we go. The dirbuster service is running GoBuster now. Okay. But if you don't want to specify it on the command line, you go to the config file, the config.toml file, and you either create this section, dirbuster, or if it's already there, you just put stuff under it, and then you would do tool equals GoBuster. All right, and now I can run this without specifying the tool because it's already specified. And when we get round to the dirbuster stuff, it will run GoBuster now. There we go, dirbuster. Here we go, GoBuster again. Okay. Can you define which ports and services to prioritize so you get more interesting results quicker? Absolutely. You could, for example, let's go back to our port scan. Let's change quick TCP to scan port 80, right? And then what we want to do is in here, we'll just do -P80. And I tell you what we'll do first, actually, before we do that. So let's copy it. We'll copy it down here. So we'll make a copy of our quick TCP port scan, and then we'll change this one to scan port 80. And we'll put -P80 here. And we'll do self.priority equals 0. Okay, so now this one will run before this one. Which means, you know, and since it's scanning only one port, you should be fine. Oh, hang on. I need to select the plugin directory. Plugins 2. Line 9. Hang on. Here we go. Oh, hang on. I need to change the scan port 80, and now we should be scanning port 80, which, yeah, so scan port 80 finished. I'm not sure why it's finished so quick. You can, I guess it finished in like roughly the same amount of time, but you know, you could create a faster scan for port 80. You could even really, if you want to assume that port 80 is open, you can do away with scanning completely and just do services equals service TCP 80 HTTP false. And of course, the freaking tabs thing. There you go. Then it instantly returns. Because you basically just told it what was open. If it finds web, SMB, FTP from the port scan, then prioritize them. Yeah, I mean, you could go in. There's no way of doing it from the command line. I guess I might be able to do a config change where you could set the priority of a plugin on the fly. That might be something worth looking into. Generally speaking, you set the priority here. But I get it. How is use the tagging part? So the tagging part is kind of complicated. Let's do -H. So there's two ways you can obviously set tags to determine which plugins should be included. Separate tags by a plus symbol to group tags together. Separate groups with a comma to create multiple groups. For a plugin to be included, it must have all the tags specified in at least one group. So you highlight that. Say you had... Oops. So we got a default... So say you want to do all the default plus HTTP, right? So that would mean that only scans, so only plugins with default and HTTP will run. Okay, so if we actually set this now, if I set this tags equal, sorry, default plus HTTP dash v localhost. No, there are no port scans. Okay, because I need to set this one now. Hang on. This is why I've tagged default port scan. So put a comma there. So now it should run. But now the SSH scan shouldn't run. It'll find port SSH, but it won't run nmap on SSH, which you can see here. So it found port 22, it found port 80, and all it's doing is running HTTP plugins because I've tagged the HTTP plugins with HTTP. I've tried to tag everything roughly with some descriptive tags. So everything has at least its name in it, I think, or the type of service it is. Obviously for long stuff, there's long. Like for Kerberos, there's Active Directory. Yeah. Angel just wants everything. Can you dynamically define tags based on the output? No, not yet. Maybe in the future. No, you can't. The idea behind tags was really to get to be able to exclude certain things or include certain things at runtime. So if you're only interested in certain plugins to run, you can include them, or if you want to write plugins that are kind of intrusive but exclude them, but only run them at certain times, you can exclude them. So yeah. And hang on a minute. Okay. So yeah, that is AutoRecon version 2. So yeah, to do that, so service scans don't create other service scans at the moment. That might be functionality later. However, right now, what you could do if you wanted to create a Nikto plugin that parsed the output, you can do that. Like, let me show you. Because for a lot of these, all we've done is just execute stuff. But you can handle the output. Again, these return things. So let's create another. Let's just create another thing. Yeah, I haven't updated the AutoRecon page. It's going to be under the development section. I'll probably do it this weekend. I'm not gonna. It's not releasing right now. Nikto. Let me just check on something. The HTTP. HTTP has a Nikto thing in it, I think. Yeah. Okay. So currently it just runs as a manual command. But let's do this. So let's create Nikto down here. We'll do async def run self under service. And again, so instead of just doing the await service.execute, right, like that'll work, but what we can do is we can process it. So we can get the process, we can get the std out and std error. So what you probably want to do, you can set so this blocks by default. So what that means is execute will only return something when it's finished. So if you set blocking equal to false, this will return instantaneously and give you a process object, an std out and std out. And then what you can do is you can do that, that cool stuff at the start. So you can do a while true line equals std out dot sorry, you need to await it dot read line, and then if line is not none. So let's just print line for now. Else we're going to break. And then the final thing you need to do is you need to await process dot wait. So let me just try that. So what we'll do is we'll set the plugin directory again. Plugins directory as plugins 2. Why is that not working? Oh, I know why. Because I didn't set this to actually match on anything. That might be helpful. Self.add service match. HTTP, okay. There we go. All right, so now you see Nikto is outputting stuff, right? So let's say, let's cancel that. Let's say we're interested for some reason in this XSS protection header, right? So what we can do is we can say if XSS protection is I think you can do is in. I believe you can do stuff like that. Let's print line again. Let's rerun it. Nope. Is there a line dot contains? I think there might be a line dot contains. Shows how often I use. Nope. Oh yeah, if value is, I'm just tired. So if value in line, there's no is. All right. Right, there you go. So we got the output. So you could, for instance, if you wanted to, if you detected this now, now you can run execute, you know, something, whatever. Yeah. And you could even, because obviously this will block. So you could even make this non-blocking, so it will instantly return and just run in the background. Yeah, if you wanted to. But I think that kind of that's the kind of way of doing it right now. Maybe at some point, plugins can trigger other plugins. Right now, I think that might be quite a big ask, especially for like the OSCP exam and stuff. I don't think that's necessary. There's ways of doing it, right? You can. That's the great thing about having these all as plugins now, is you can do whatever you want, really. There's not really much you can't do here. Okay. I'll delete this now. I don't want to run Nikto again. Any other questions? Because I think we're pretty much coming up to the 2-hour mark. This will be available on GitHub. I'll probably put it up this weekend. It'll be under the development section. I'll link to it on Twitter, but yeah, it's definitely in a beta now. So please use it. Please report it when it messes up, because it will. I don't recommend you use it for the OSCP exam yet, unless you're absolutely 100% comfortable with it. It's still dev stuff. It's still definitely very much not a version 1 of version 2, I guess. So you can call it version 2A or 2B, I guess. We're still in beta, but yeah, this is a vast improvement on version 1 in terms of effectively everything. It's way more powerful. It's faster. It doesn't have all the issues that AutoRecon version 1 had. And it's super extensible. It's taken a long time to write, just to show you how many lines. I mean, not like lines of code or anything, but there's 1,421 lines of code in the main AutoRecon file now, which is, I think, it might not be that much more than the original, but the fact is it has to handle so much more. So yeah, and obviously, all these plugins I've coded as well. So I'm pretty sure all the code, all the service scans that were in the original version are now in this one. So yeah. Oh yeah, and I guess one thing I didn't mention is that you have plugins that just have a manual function. So we've got brute force SSH, which will just dump out manual commands for brute forcing. It doesn't run anything. So effectively, ServiceScan plugins can have a run method or a manual method, or just both. They have to at least have one though. Cool. All right, I am probably gonna call it and go do something else and relax, and yeah. I'm glad that everyone turned up. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone enjoys using this as much as I kind of enjoyed writing it, to be honest. It was a lot of fun. Alright guys, I'll flash up the stream ending, and as always, my my social media stuff has been on the screen the entire time, but there it is, just in case. So yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you again soon. And if you're at DEF CON, shoot me a message on my Discord server, and we can plan to meet up. Alright guys, thank you very much, have a great weekend.